If you're just tuning in, Rob Melanchuk, host of It's Your Call, having a great conversation tonight regarding commentary and your comments on some of the issues that you have written over the last couple of weeks, questions regarding concerns of yours or just points of interest that you would like some commentary on. So I thought I would ask a great friend of mine whom I consider my mentor, but also a gentleman who has great knowledge. I absolutely believe in the scriptures regarding theology, etc. And so we're throwing out these issues and I'm wanting him, Dr. Don Carmont, to comment on them as well, or do a commentary, and then we're going to get your comments on them as well. So we've done a number of things already, but we're going to talk now about the Sabbath. And a number of you have written and made comments about the Sabbath, the seventh day. Was man made for the Sabbath, or the Sabbath made for man? And how does the Sabbath actually apply to us today? So I'm going to go right now to Dr. Don Carmont, who also is the author of The Naked Mentor. Don, what about the Sabbath day?
Well, God was very adamant in His instructions concerning observing the Sabbath day and keeping it holy. When you enter into the land, do this. And the Sabbath was laid down. And one of the reasons why that the purpose God, the writer of the Hebrews says that God worked, He did the creation in 6 days and rested on the seventh day. Hebrews 4:4, He spake at a certain place of the seventh day, and this wise God did rest the seventh day from all His works. But there was a principle behind the Sabbath that God was teaching, and it was the principle of rest. And there were, of course, many Sabbaths. There was a Sabbath of 7 years. On the seventh year, the land was to rest. After 7 periods of 7 years, there was the year of Jubilee. And just as circumcision, the seal of the Abrahamic covenant, was a foreshadowing of God's covenant in the heart, and Paul writes of God cutting away the foreskin of the heart. There's a deeper, bigger message. But as to whether the Sabbath is binding as the seventh day on believers, it's a very interesting thing, because as God rested in the perfect work of creation on the seventh day, later in the book of Hebrews, the writer talks about how Christ, when He had finished the work of redemption, that He sat down at the right hand of God, and He invites us to enter into His rest. Well, the principle behind the law was you work first, and after 6 days shalt thou work, and the seventh you will rest. The principle of redemption reverses that. And the first day of the week was observed by the early believers. It was the day in which Christ rose from the dead. And when you read the book of Acts, the history of the early church, they consistently gathered on the first day of the week.
And the first day would be the Sunday.
What we call Sunday, which is unfortunate because we've adapted the pagan term for the days of the week, just as we did for the term Easter and other holidays. But yes, it would be the Lord. I always refer to it as the Lord's Day, okay, because it is the first day of the week, Sunday, that they gathered to worship. But the principle behind that was Christ rested in His finished work of redemption, and He invites us to enter into His rest. And so the writer of the Hebrews says, let us therefore fear lest a promise being left us concerning His rest, any of you would come short of it. We who have believed enter into that rest. And so Shabbat, the idea of rest, is speaking more figuratively of the rest in the finished work that Christ has accomplished for our salvation. There was no need to add anything to it. The contention around circumcision, around any of the legalistic applications of adding things, Paul kept saying, let no man judge you in matters of eat or drink or the new moon or the Sabbath days, emphasizing throughout Romans, throughout Galatians, throughout the entire writings, that what Christ did on the cross was finished. When he proclaimed telestatai, it is done, it is finished, it was a finished work. It was done. It was total, and there was nothing to add to that. And now we enter into the rest of His finished work. And because we do, it's all of grace. We observe the first day of the week symbolically. And rather than it being work 6 days and get a day of rest at the end, it is the first day of the week that is celebrated, commemoration of the resurrection of the Lord, and also the tradition that was established by the early church.
Okay. So, Don, we're going to get to the phones here in just 30 seconds, but it's and I guess how I want to ask this is, what you're saying is the fact that if the Sabbath, maybe I'm not going to ask this correctly, but my point is, many people have the issue that, well, God rested on a day, so we need to rest on a day, and some of them hold to that Saturday, not the Sunday. But the point is, there's got to be a day when we don't work, we do nothing, and that's mandatory and important. Am I pushing that a little too, or driving that a little too hard?
I think that anything that is imposing and saying you must do this because God rested the seventh day and He commanded us to rest. The New Testament does not impose upon us that bondage. It is, our salvation is predicated solely upon what Christ has done. The faith by which we are saved itself is the gift from God. It is God of His own will. He gave us the new birth, Peter writes. And so I was raised in a tradition where, you certainly abstained from certain acts of labor, but that was quite a legalistic approach to things. Mm-hmm. And I think that we would be better off if we rested at least one day a week. I don't know that there's anything in the New Testament that would suggest that is to be imposed or binding upon us as believers.